Hey everyone, welcome to another edition of the Way Wednesday. Today I have with me Donna Barnett. She is one of our fabulous regional vice presidents and a speech language pathologist like I am. And we really wanted to talk today a little bit about IDDSI, or the International Dysphagia Diet Standardization Initiative, that you may or may not have been hearing about. Donna has been working pretty closely with some customers who are actually making this transition. And so I thought she'd be a great person to kind of pick her brain and talk to her about it. But if you haven't heard about IDDSI, basically what's happened is that a multidisciplinary panel has gotten together. They did some research. They took a look at how we were really labeling diets, how we were looking and assessing consistencies to make sure that they were consistent across the board, and found that there really was no gold standard, right, Donna? Like there wasn't any, there was a national diet, the national diet, dysphagia diet, excuse me. Jeez, I'm having a hard time today. The national dysphagia diet, there was that. But there were a lot of variations, and inter-rater, reliability wasn't always that consistent. And so they took a look at all of that and decided we need something a little more standardized, a little more global. And really this is, when we're talking about IDDSI, a global initiative. It's happening all over the place. And they really took a look at patient and caregivers and what's going on in the healthcare industry, dietary, and they did a lot of research on that. And what they came up with are some really easy to understand, not just for, caregivers and staff, but for us as well, easy in that it really is going to help make it a lot more standardized, right? So they looked at how to test consistencies. They looked at and inter-rater reliability to make sure that wherever we were, soft and bite-sized diet, for example, is a soft and bite-sized diet, 600 miles away. So looking at those kinds of things and trying to make them easy to learn, easy to recognize, and easy for families, once a patient goes home and is on a modified diet. So Donna, since you are really kind of in the thick of it with the field right now, I was hoping maybe you would talk a little bit about maybe why, again, just kind of broaden that a little bit, why we're shifting from IDDSI, from a national diet, dysphagia diet, to IDDSI.
Sure. Well, as most of you know, if you've ever worked in a facility as a speech therapist, you know that the diet order that you order does not always come out looking like you think it should. Part of that is because there aren't specific things that say, here's how big it can be to be ground meats, or here's how large it can be to be chopped meats. And the International Dysphagia Diet attempts to standardize and give you measurements that actually say, in order to be chopped, here's the size that the items can be. In order to be ground, here's a test that you can perform to make sure that the items are the size that you want them to be. And they give some great illustrations. I think as we're working through the actual framework, you'll see, wow, this really does make sense. Liquids are the same way. It gives some specific flow tests on here's how you can test a liquid to see if it meets the standardized liquid consistency, and check the viscosity of things. So it's really just to make us all do it the same, so that when a resident's in the hospital and then they come to you in the skilled nursing facility, you know the diet and the consistency and what they recommended and what you recommended is going to be the same.
That's right. And, the testing that she talked about a little bit, like really you don't need specialized equipment. It really is like using a fork and a spoon. But the visuals are really great, and it's just, I agree. So I've gotten a lot of questions about this, and you may have as well. But is this a Medicare requirement?
It's not a Medicare requirement. It's actually a recommendation, a global recommendation. And so in a lot of countries, it's already been implemented and they're using it throughout the country, like Sweden and Australia. But here in the United States, you're starting to find pockets where it's being initiated. ASHA has put out a lot of good information on it. What we found in my area, small rural area of Kentucky, is that the hospitals, a couple of the hospitals were starting to talk about it, and we knew that we were going to be getting their residents, and they were going to be under the IDDSI diets. And so it was important for us to start talking about it as the customer base, to say, you know, first of all, are we going to make this transition? And if we're going to, what's the process we need to follow to do that?
Right. And so thinking about talking to the facilities and making a switch, you know, what does that really take when we're looking at transitioning from the National Dysphagia Diet to IDDSI?
It seems like it would be very simple because the crosswalk from the National Dysphagia Diet to the IDDSI seems very simple, but when you start digging in, you find that there's a little bit more that you need to do. So from a step standpoint, probably becoming familiar with the IDDSI terminology, which as speech therapists, if you're with Health Pro Heritage, you're already seeing that terminology on your evaluation. So, but if you're not with Health Pro Heritage, or if you want some additional references, there's actually an app, a free app. You can get it through iOS or Android on IDDSI, and that will really help you with terminology of the diet, as well as for Health Pro Heritage, we've got some resources in box. So the first step is kind of to educate yourself so that you know the different diets and you know the different terminology. The next step is to determine who your implementation team is going to be. And once you determine who needs to be involved, make sure you talk to dietary, because really the menus and all that dietary has to do, they have to be heavily involved, even more than nursing, because nursing we have to do education and training, but dietary, they may even need additional equipment in the kitchen in order to meet the guidelines of IDDSI. Once you've determined your implementation team, making sure that you have administrative support and that they understand what you're doing and that they approve that, yes, we want to move forward to the change, that's an important step too.
Well, let's talk about that switch, because you talked a little bit about dietary and what might be involved from that side of what's happening here. You know, when you're thinking about vendors, food vendors, do we know yet how many of them in the United States at least are moving or starting to shift towards adding the new terminology and colors and numbers with IDDSI onto those food products that might be available for? Yeah.
We really do not know. We don't know the answer to that. However, I know at least with my specific customer, when they checked with their food vendor was very aware of IDDSI and has been willing to have a representative participate in all the preparation calls that we're doing, which is really nice to have that food vendor on there as well, to be able to answer some of the questions. And they've also helped a lot with the questions about the kitchen equipment and how things might be prepared.
Okay, that's good. That's good to know. So thinking about as facilities transition, and you may say have maybe vendors using one term, but we're starting to use another term. What are some tips when we're looking at documenting what we're recommending and communicating our modified diet recommendations to the team? How do you suggest we sort of handle that in the documentation if there's a little bit of an overlap there during a transition period?
Right, that's a great question. I think probably the best process would be to use both terminologies in that instance. And right now, I think we're already starting to do that because, like I said, the IDDSI terminology is included on our evaluations, and yet when we're documenting, we're using the National Dysphagia Diet terminology still. So I think utilizing both of those for a time period is probably the best idea, and then phasing out the National Dysphagia Diet as you feel like people are familiar enough with IDDSI.
Yeah. I think it's just, hearing all of this from you, Donna, if I were to give one piece of advice to our clinicians out there right now who are not yet in the thick of it, is to, number one, go learn about it. Because like Donna said, you might actually have some hospitals moving towards this before your facility even does if you're in a SNF. And if you start getting all these recommendations with these new terms and you're not familiar with them, well, that could be a potential issue, right? So go learn about it. I'm going to check out that app. I had not heard about that, so I think that's great. I would love to see what's on there. I'm sure that's going to be a great resource. So thank you for mentioning that. As she said, if you're Healthcare Heritage, we have lots of tools that we've developed from the IDDSI resource bank that they have. You can go to their website as well. And Donna, do you have that website in front of you?
I can pull it up real quickly.
Oh, I found it. Here we go. It's iddsi.org/framework. And, or you can probably just go to iddsi.org and it'll give you just access to a ton of research and resources. And there's like YouTube videos, right, that talk about, beginning the implementation process and testing the food, and just there's a ton of stuff in there as well. So, yeah. All right. Thank you so much, Donna. I really appreciate you being with us. It was so nice to have you. Let us know, as always, if you have any questions, comments. Let us know if you're using IDDSI already in your facilities, or if you've heard about any facilities or hospitals or whoever it is around you beginning to use that terminology, and where you are, because we would love to hear that as well. Thanks so much for your time. Thank you, Donna. I appreciate having you. All right. Thanks, and have a great day. Happy documenting.
Bye-bye.